This evening. So I think the first part we need to do, because we've got so many members of the public here, is I think hand over to my colleague Eddie, who will take you through what happens in the unfortunate event of a problem.
Thanks, Chair. There'll be no fire drill tonight, and the fire alarm is allowed continuous ring. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the building calmly and promptly, using the stairs next to the lift if possible. The fire escape in the council chamber should only be used as a last resort. Do not stop to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. The evacuation point is at street level in the Knoll Road car park, and the assembly point is indicated by a green sign. Do not leave the assembly point until you're told it is safe to do so. And lastly, if you have reduced mobility and the fire alarm rings, make yourself known to myself.
Wonderfully clear and succinct, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thanks, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Richard Wilson, Councillor Ying Perrott is subbing. I've also received apologies from Councillor Julie Hoden, Councillor David O'Mahony is subbing. I've received apologies from Councillor Noble and Councillor Rakes is subbing. And I've also received apologies from Councillor McGrath.
That's wonderful. So next we move on to Chair's announcements. So this evening we have Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing with us, who are here to give us a brief presentation on North Court and what the plans are for the remediations there. Is everyone happy for that presentation to go ahead? That's wonderful. Thanks for that unanimous support, councillors. I appreciate that. Over to you, Guy.
Right, thank you, Rob. So, my name's Guy Burdett. I'm Exec Director of Development for Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing, and I'm accompanied by my good friend Dan Fielder, who's a key member of our Safer Buildings team. So, a little bit of a backstory. We own, maintain and manage circa just over 500 homes within the Surrey Heath Borough, and have been a long-standing partner for many, many years. As Rob rightly said, we're here this evening to talk about North Court, obviously a scheme just over the way from this building here today. And on that note, I'm going to pass over to my good friend Dan to really walk through where we're at and a little bit of the backstory surrounding the scheme.
Well, I'm sure you'll know North Court because it is literally just around the corner from here, because I drove past it on the way in today because I took a drive-by for the first time. So obviously North Court's a mixed tenure block of 55 units. It is a HRB, although it is under 18 metres. So it's 16.7 metres. So we could flip to the next slide, please. It's 16.7 metres, but it's 7 stories tall, so it is a high-risk building under the Building Safety Act. We have obviously been moving forwards with our investigations in that building. We are not the freeholder. Surrey Heath Council itself is the freeholder with a superior landlord of Standard Life, and obviously we hold the lease for the management. We have responsibilities for the internals and external walls. Although we use a managing agent to deliver some of our services there, we do hold that responsibility. We act as the principal accountable person for this building, as we have responsibilities under the Building Safety Act for the external wall. So we've been leading our duties on that to move forwards. And obviously part of that is our investigation and the remediation works that are required. If we can go to the next slide, please. There we go. So obviously we carried out our initial investigations in March and May of 21. Unfortunately, that was still somewhat affected by COVID to get in some of the internal areas, so it took a couple of investigations to get our full survey completed. We have then engaged with the original contractor, which is Lan O'Rourke, so they were the contractor who built the building, and have done a joint inspection with them in 2022, following that survey to really identify that we believe there are defects from time construction and give them opportunity to view them. Obviously, the main defects we've identified is there are cavity barriers missing in around windows and openings and the penetrations through the external wall. There are cavity barriers that have been misinstalled or not there at all. And some fire stoppings and seals within the building weren't installed correctly. Some fire doors in the installation weren't also properly installed. There was no change in evacuation strategy, although there were defects identified. how we operate is we always follow the advice of our fire engineers. And our fire engineers said that although defects require remediation, it never required a change of evacuation strategy or management of the building, but we did have to move forwards with getting the remediation works completed. If you go to the next slide, please. We have been working with Lan O'Rourke to develop a remedial solution for this building and obviously hold them accountable to ensure that the building is rectified. Obviously, this is done and agreed through an independent fire engineer that we appoint to act on our behalf of our residents to ensure the solution that's developed delivers a safe outcome and the requirements we need from the building. Obviously, we're in a very positive position at the minute. We have finalised commercial negotiations, which for anyone who's been through this process is a key milestone. Of once you get the commercials agreed, we are very much dotting the I's and T's now. Yeah. We anticipate, in reality, signing the agreement within the next 2 weeks. I'll be honest with you, this is slightly later than we hoped. We were very much hoping to be on site in September. I much prefer to be honest with everyone and say it's going to probably be mid to late October now. But I think given the scale of the project, so a few weeks slippage is just making sure we have the absolutely right agreement. And that is a very solid date because I think we are due to sign the next couple of weeks. Yeah. It is a concurrent programme internally and externally. Will last approximately 55 to 60 weeks. And what we've agreed is works will be done with residents in situ. It is, although the works will be done inside flats, I would say it is along the lines of being as disruptive having your kitchen and bathroom replaced is how I would describe it. It is different to that because you're talking about putty pads, work around your windows and sills, but it's work we strongly feel can be done with residents in situ. But what we have agreed with Lan O'Rourke is we're going to treat each individual as an individual and have a sensible conversation with them. What we've also looked at is insisting, because we're aware that from the feedback from the residents, a lot of them do work from home. So again, we're looking at ensuring that Lan O'Rourke fund a welfare facility, Wi-Fi access, quiet working space. So when work's going on during the daytime hours in your home, their homes, they have a place to work from. We anticipate doing obviously works on site in October, as I said. If you want to go to the next slide. Again, I think one of the questions that I get asked and I answer every day is around how we ensure the quality of works and how we ensure that what we're remedying and the works that have been done by Lan O'Rourke are to the right standard and we don't just repeat issues of the past. Again, we will have a employee agent employed by MTVH on site, so they're there to manage the works from our point of view and ensure the works Lan O'Rourke doing are to our standards. And where we've agreed key details with our fire engineers and experts that they are repeated and delivered effectively across the portfolio. Our fire engineers on this project are Tenos Limited. They're one of the largest fire engineers in the country and we've used them right from the beginning through our internal investigations, agreeing the sign-off of the solution provided by Lan O'Rourke, and they will be attending site to quality manage. And again, agreeing key benchmarking features and quality standards that have to be met. And that's then obviously supported by the employer's agent. So we've put a really robust framework in place around how the works we deliver, and that's one of the fundamental reasons the contract's so complicated, is because actually we need to have that absolute assurance that any of the defects that were there are rectified, and we have the information, assurance, and evidence to support that they've been rectified to required standards. One, it's the right thing to do. Two, it's the requirement of the Building Safety Act, and for both reasons, we want to make sure we get it absolutely right. Again, we'll have a project manager on site from MTVH to project manage the whole scheme, so the employer's agent, Tenos as our technical support. And again, part of my team is I look after resident engagement for all the portfolio for both the inspections and the remediation works. So I have a dedicated person in my team, I think in this Northcote is Blossom, who knows all the residents, will deal with all the resident engagement, coordinate all the access requirements throughout the whole project. And is our point of contact because we feel very strongly that actually managing the residents through this is our role and it's not something that Lan O'Rourke will be leading on, so we will be taking the lead on that to ensure that we support our residents through this journey. We have been engaging with them on a regular basis. This information has gone out to our residents, I think yesterday actually, because we got the firm date of when we thought we'd signed the contract, so the latest update went out as this week, confirming those timeframes for them. So I think we are in quite a good place in this block compared to many we're in. It has been a long journey with Lan O'Rourke to get to this stage, and I think it's only fair to say it's probably not got as fast as we would have liked, But then I think it was one of the very early blocks we looked at in the programme dating back to 2021. We're now seeing a great acceleration and getting it on site and moving it forwards. And obviously are very confident that we can get these works delivered successfully.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, Dan. I mean, in addition to what Dan's sort of said there, I mean, it has been a long journey. It's been very stressful for our residents, as you could probably imagine. Absolutely terrible situation, really. But the facts are the building should have been built correctly in the first place. But like many buildings, it wasn't. However, Lang O'Rourke have now agreed that remedial solution with us, in line with our requirements and our fire experts, and they are bearing the majority of the cost associated with this. We're obviously bearing some of the cost ourselves. The customers won't be bearing the cost, which rightly so. So we're looking forward to that better day when remediation is complete and everybody can move on with their lives and enjoy living here in Camberley. Thank you, Rob. Sorry.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, I'd like to open it up to questions from anyone. Are people happy for questions from both members and members of the public? Everyone happy with that? Brilliant. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Councillor Rowlands.
Yes, Chairman. I just wondered if the council has any Clerk of Works reports, because I met a representative of someone who lives in this block, and of all the central flats, it has a terrible record of breakdown and real problems to be sorted out. I presume we're going to get, as a result of meeting the representatives who are working to fix the very gross repairs that have to be carried out, we're going to get a breakdown of what the tenants have experienced, and the long history of really, and which still exists, of breakdown in the basic standard of living standards in that particular block. Of all the flat complexes, I think it's one that suffers the most. My colleague and I met representatives of the tenants, and it was a very sad history that we were told about the basic maintenance and standard of the accommodation. So I just wondered whether the council has any record of being involved through the Clerk of Works, which they should have been, I would have thought, with what quite serious breakdowns within the basic standard of those flats.
Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland, for the question. What do you mean by Clerk of Works reports? Is this in relation to building regulations compliance?
That would be right. It's a building inspector.
So I do have something that was provided by the building control manager. If I can just find the relevant document, I can refer to it. Here you go. So this has come from Sam Hallam, who's the building control partnership manager for Surrey Heath and Runnymede. And what she's effectively said is during the course of construction, a construction project of this size, building control would generally visit on a fairly routine basis, notionally once a week, and carry out a site inspection to ascertain whether compliance was being achieved. This method of inspection routine does not provide full oversight of the project. It's not the responsibility of building control to achieve compliance with the building regulations. That's the legal responsibility of the developer, and obviously in this instance, that's Lang O'Rourke. It's the duty of building control to ascertain, as far as reasonably practicable, that compliance has been achieved, but this cannot be conclusive due to the nature of their role. Ultimately, what that means is the building control surveyors are there to spot check. And clearly, if they did see any non-conformity or anything that wasn't compliant with the building regulations at that point in time, then they would alert it and they wouldn't sign it off. But clearly, during the inspections carried out by Surrey Heath during the construction of this block, they didn't identify any non-conformities that weren't rectified.
Thank you. I think I've got Councillor Jonathan Quinn online with a question. Jonathan?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but your picture... Oh, I can see you as well.
You should be able to see me as well. My Wi-Fi is cutting out, so please do bear with me. I'm sorry, Chair, this is kind of a three-part question. I hope that's acceptable. I am the councillor, one of the councillors that represents the ward, which includes Northcourt. So there's kind of three parts to this question, really. Residents were first told that the remediation works would take 70 weeks, and now they're being told it will take 55 weeks. And some of the residents I spoke to are a bit concerned that they're concerned about what's been left out. So what has happened to mean there's a change from 70 weeks to 55 weeks? And they really want the reassurance that the remediation works will mean the flats have their EWS1. And so obviously, so banks will lend and, mortgages can be given, and so they can sell these flats once again. A lot of residents are really concerned about, and this was touched on in the presentation, about the work that's happening in their individual flats. So a lot of the residents I spoke to, they don't know the scale of the works that are happening in their flats. And you've said some people work from home, but many people don't. And they might feel uncomfortable about contractors being in their flat when they're not there. And so is there capacity, I know you said you were going to work with residents and speak to them, but would there be capacity for some of the remediation works to occur at weekends, for example, so residents can be in their flats when the works are happening? And finally, so I understand that you're the main leaseholder for Northcourt, but there's a company called First Port that run kind of day-to-day maintenance and repairs of the building. Now, I've heard that there's no joined up thinking with them when it comes to the remediation works. And they've recently proposed things such as repainting the outside of Northcourt, which doesn't make any sense if it's going to need to be repainted again after remediation works have occurred. So why are you not liaising more with First Port about the remediation works and making sure they don't stray into doing stuff that will be pointless after the remediation works have occurred? Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Guy, Dan, who would like to take those questions?
Thank you for the questions. I'll try and work through them. If I do miss anything, please just point it out to me. Obviously, I think there was a change in when we gave the original estimate about the length of the works. I think it was a true estimate, and it was very early on in the process. And again, when you're trying to manage expectations, particularly because I suspect it was probably me who said it, because I think I've led every residents' meeting for the Northcourt throughout this process, is you're trying to give an assessment of a programme you haven't seen yet. So I haven't seen the full programme from Laing O'Rourke, and when I'm giving an assessment of what I think it is, it's my judgment around what I think the length of works would be. I appreciate 55 weeks and 70 weeks is slightly different, but it is around looking at it, trying to give what I think the works will take. Again, in relation to the assurance that nothing is left out, we have independent fire engineers who are highly qualified and highly regulated and insured to ensure that they're giving their expert opinion that the works that need to be done are being done, and we're absolutely following their advice. And I think leading on to the second question is the works are absolutely intended to, one, put this building back to the required standard, deliver the correct fire engineered solution to do that, ensure that we can issue an EWS1, and more importantly for this sort of building is ensure that we can garner all the information we need to ensure that building safety case is also a high risk building, which will require the scrutiny as sort of the building safety regulator for that requirement. The works are, again, we're right at the stage, and in our process what we do is as soon as we have that contract signed and that final scope of work agreed, and we hold a residents meeting. So as I've said, we hope to be in contract within the next 2 weeks. I think that's a very realistic target. I would slightly want to try and be more ambitious than that, but I think 2 weeks is a very realistic number. Yeah. As soon as we have that, the first thing we do is we sit down and hold sit down because it's on Teams, unfortunately, hold a residents meeting. And we do this on every one of our projects. And we do talk through in great detail what works are going to take place, both externally and internally, because at that point we've got an absolute agreement and a contract in place, so we can speak with real assurance around what those works are. And that's including diagrams, talking through what it's going to be in flat, what the disruptions are going to be in their homes. We have talked through at a high level what it's going to be from the very beginning, because we know what the defects are, we've known for a long time. So we have our absolute opinion. But as soon as we have that full scope of works and programme from Laing O'Rourke, we do talk through them in great detail. I think it's important to understand that, yes, works are happening internally, but it will be effectively unit by unit. So while works, it's a 55-week programme, in effect, you will have works inside a unit. I think they're looking at doing 2 units concurrently for a week to 10 days, and then that unit is in effect, that flat is in effect finished, and work moves on and there won't be a need to return. So again, it is, in effect, we're saying these residents will have a bit of disruption when those works are completed for a week to 10 days, 2 weeks, depending on the size of the flat. And once that's done inside their dwelling, yes, the external works will continue, but the disruption to them within the home shouldn't reoccur.
Dan, just in addition to that, if I may, to the point made, consideration will be given to individual circumstances. I mean, we'll obviously have that meeting we'll have many meetings, but certainly the meeting Dan referenced there, and then obviously we'll have individual engagement with all residents on an individual basis and looking at what is required going forward and try and get everybody through this as quickly and as painlessly as possible and get that building remediated and all the documentation issued so people can move on with their lives.
And residents have been assured of that already, and again, we will make sure that that's referred. I think your final point was around First Port, who are the managing agent we have in place. And again, we've had meetings with residents, and I think the local MP as well recently, around First Port. And again, I think it is always challenging when you have two organisations working concurrently in a building. I think this is a fair statement to say that the communication between First Port and ourselves in the past hasn't been probably as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
I think there's no point trying to sugarcoat it. It's clear from the residents, it's clear from anyone who spoke to them around that. Again, how we operate within that building is definitely changing. There is a piece of work which is being led by one of our assistant directors for home ownership around how we approach First Port. And again, I think internal review around how that relationship works going forwards. And Joe, is it giving the best outcome for our residents is the primary focus around that. Obviously, as we move forwards, and one of the things I said, particularly around the safety of that building and how we manage any risk items, it is a high-risk building. For that purpose, Joe, the building safety management aspect is being delivered by MTVH, not First Port. So that will be controlled by ourselves, irrespective of who's doing the day-to-day repairs and maintenance. The assurance of safety and fulfilling our responsibility as the principal accountable person for that building is something that MTVH will be delivered. And again, I think that's very important for me and for Guy around how we ensure that actually the safety of that building and the assurance, which is a huge part of the Building Safety Act, is delivered around how we engage with them and make them feel safe in their homes. And Joe, that's a journey we're going through with the remediation, but will be an ongoing piece of work we carry forwards into the ongoing management under the new regimes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions this evening? Councillor Sean MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you to the partners for coming in at what I think is fairly short notice and giving us such an update, so very helpful. It is unfortunately a sad fact that during remediation projects, particularly brownfield, risks actually increase. When you've talked a minute ago about assurance and fire safety, I think it's been with a view to the long term. Can you give any assurance to the residents in terms of the risk management during the period of the works?
Well, the microphone's that way. This way.
You'll have to use your microphone, otherwise it doesn't pick up online.
Sean's only here, so yeah. No.
Sorry, Guy. It's because we've got live stream as well, so it's a real.
So sorry.
Yeah,
Rob.
no, that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. As long as you can talk to your microphone, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
So it's a really good point, Sean. I think we need to develop our plan further between now and obviously getting on site. Obviously, there's a mobilisation period, but the bottom line is we are going to have a professional team of consultants supporting the mission. Dan made reference to what is called our employers agent. Sorry, Rob, do apologise. Struggling following instructions, for goodness sake. But we will have what's called an employers agent, sort of overseeing the works, so providing sort of professional, sort of administrative sort of activities to support the mission. We will obviously have our fire consultants, TENOS, as well, doing inspections. We will have our project manager on site, making sure everything's all okay. And obviously we'll be working with building control as well to make sure that everything is done in the right way. So we as an organisation, health and safety is everything. So we will bring to bear all of our other infrastructure within the organisation to make sure that everything is done correctly. But also, just to sort of also give a little bit of assurance, notwithstanding the fact that there are defects in this building that shouldn't have been there in the first place, that's no different to many buildings, sadly, in this country, Vaz. Unfortunately, it's a terrible situation that you guys will be familiar with, no doubt, anyhow. But Laing O'Rourke are a big organisation, a very big, credible contractor. So I think we've got a good contractor that's committed. We've got a specification that's been worked up, Essentially, we've got a plan that will continue to be reviewed as we make sure we go through the construction phase and make sure there's no accidents on site and all of the things that you're sort of referencing there, Sean.
Do you want to come back? Cool. Okay. Any further questions this evening? Yep, absolutely. If it's a brief one, thank you.
Just as a member of the public. So it just struck me as you were talking through the plan, Dan, that if it's a rolling programme over 55 weeks or so, if I were one of those residents, I'd like to know, am I at the beginning, middle or end, and set those expectations early on? It's that part of the plan. That was the only question.
I think that's the exact detail I was talking about when we can give that rolling programme. And again, one of the reasons we can't give that detail until we have the contract and the programme in place is that's when we actually have that information. We've spoken at high level, and I think every resident has a broad understanding of what's going to happen. What we want to give them is the detail, because actually, when is it going to be affected, Joe? And there is always going to be some flexibility. It's not a rigid programme. It's about working around our customers to deliver the best outcome and flexibility where we can. But yes, absolutely, they will know when they are in the programme, and we will work with them to make sure that it's at a time and date as far as we possibly can to the programme that it works around them to be able to get it delivered.
Okay, that concludes questions from that item. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We have an awesome agenda this evening. You're very, very welcome to stay, but I appreciate you may have prior commitments, so can't. So if you need to... if you need to quietly disappear off, you're very welcome to. So we'll roll on to the next item, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any corrections from the minutes of the previous meeting? No? Everyone happy for me to sign them as a correct record? Unanimous agreement. Thank you, everyone. So item 4, declarations of interest. Obviously, we have a number of voluntary organisations here this evening. So if members want to just ponder for a moment and see if they have any interest they wish to declare. Councillor Mary Glarat.
I'm the councillor attached to Age Concern. Okay, so I have a interest in that.
Councillor Rowlands has got
Councillor Murray Rowlands.
Yes, well, Campbell Inn District Job Club, declaration of interest.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Councillor Sean MacDonald.
Yeah, having taken soundings, I've been told it's prudent to declare that I'm a regular donor to the Hope Hub, and if I can make a shameless plug for Gift Aid in the process.
I think we note that shameless plug for Gift Aid, a very important message. And good job I'm using surnames, so it's Councillor Sean Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I was a trustee as a member of the Council for Surrey Heath Age Concern, and at the next trustee meeting I will become an official trustee of Surrey Heath Age Concern.
On behalf of the committee, congratulations on your forthcoming appointment. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Can I just jump in, Chair?
Gosh, absolutely.
I don't know if, I can't remember if it is of any concern that I am also the secretary of the Gordon School, PA. But it's not mentioned here tonight.
I'll check, but I think that is okay.
Yes, Chair, if it's not mentioned tonight, we're all good. Can I just ask the various councillors just to confirm those were non-pecuniary interests that you had? Yeah, perfect.
You're all agreeing they are non-pecuniary? Yep. Okay, so now we get to the exciting bit. It's over to Sally. The floor's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, any members of the public still here, and good evening, revenue grant holders. Thank you so much for taking the time and trouble to come to see us this evening. Revenue grants are a key part of the terms of reference of this scrutiny committee and an essential part of our council business. This committee's role is to review the services provided by agencies with a particular focus on the recipients of revenue and leisure grants and their performance against the service level agreements we have set for them. In this meeting, we have invited current revenue grant recipients to share with the committee their current performance reports in order to enable the committee to examine those reports and ask any questions that they feel that they would like to prior to applications for next year's grants opening, which we expect to be later in the year. Please be aware that we have not asked revenue grant recipients to present their reports in order to be as efficient as possible and to maximise the time for committee questions and scrutiny. The Chair will invite each grant holder to speak. They may wish to do so to highlight parts of their reports, but then the floor will be open to the committee for questions. I think the first on the agenda is Citizens Advice Surrey Heath, and I'd now like to take the Chair's opportunity to ask Citizens Advice to speak should they wish to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us here today. I think we were told to produce a two-page summary of our impact and work, but I think also a few weeks prior to that I sent round our annual review, which gives a bit more detail about our services. We are obviously in a stage of crisis for a lot of people with the cost of living and the impact on that, our impact on people, and we are seeing many of those people turning up at our door at the moment. We are benefiting from having the Household Support Fund to offer to those people as well as other emergency and crisis support. But the key thing is to be able to provide advice and to try and capture those people at an early stage to prevent them getting further into crisis. We cover such a wide range of topics: housing, employment, immigration, relationship issues, as well as benefits and debt. But having a strong core service is absolutely crucial to us in order to attract funding for further specialist services to support local residents. I think I've summarised everything in the paper, so does anyone have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Johnny Cope.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your report. I found your sort of table of numbers of cases, etc., very useful. I just wondered if you could pull out any trends for us in comparison to previous years. Are you seeing an increase in the number of people that you're dealing with year on year, and are the types of cases that you're dealing with changing at all?
Yes, well, we're certainly seeing an increase in people with debt and money problems, and we anticipate that that's going to increase with the increase in mortgage rates and the high cost of everything going up. What we're seeing is that we used to be able to look at people's debts and go through their income and expenditure, and I think the average was about £30 at the end of the month people had to furnish those debts and to work out a payment plan. Now, I would say around 60% of the people we see have what is called a negative income. So they have no money after paying for essentials to enable them to pay anything towards their debts. And that's obviously very concerning because it's fairly limited in what we can do. We can put them in touch with grants and the charitable support. We can try and encourage them to look at their spending. But the fact is that there are many people who just are not earning enough to cover the basics. And this is increasingly people who are also in work. It's not just people on benefits. I think this situation that we've seen over the past couple of years has hit right across the board, and a lot of people were coming to us who are sort of, they've never been to a Citizens Advice before, they've never had those sort of issues. So it is a concerning trend. Obviously, energy bills have been one of the main problems, and I think that will continue. Despite the energy prices coming down a bit, they're still a lot higher than they were before this cost of living crisis, so we don't anticipate there will be much let up over the winter.
Councillor Murray Rowlands.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering, the work on debt management is usually done by specialist assistants. If there's this sort of expansion in the problem of people being able to cope, are you in difficulty in getting enough people, having enough people to actually do this work now?
We have been fortunate enough to be successful in a lottery bid, which has enabled us to recruit an additional money advice caseworker, pretty much full-time. We already have 2 other part-time money advice caseworkers, so we've got quite a team supported by project funding, so not the core funding that we get from the council, but through projects that we've applied for. Certainly what we're seeing is trying to recruit and attract people with the right skills is increasingly difficult. We don't pay huge amounts. We are a charity and we're quite limited in our paying, but even finding the people with the right skills. So when we do have people that we've trained, we're really keen to keep them on and to not lose them, which is why we're always looking for further funding to continue their services, because they're much needed.
Thank you. Now, a question from myself. Obviously, here in Surrey Heath, we've got one of the highest levels of mortgaged properties in the country. I think we're top 20, maybe even top 15. How are you seeing those coming off fixed rates? Are they coming to you? Are you seeing problems around that? And are you expecting an increase or a decrease in problems around that?
We are starting to see people come in. I think a lot of people have been on fixed rates and have been protected, so it's only just now that it's starting to come in where their mortgage rates are jumping, they're sometimes tripling or even more in terms of the costs. So we have started to see people coming in, and we anticipate that is going to get worse as the year goes on, because as more people come off the rates and struggle to find new rates. One of the problems, and something that Citizens Advice is campaigning on, is around the local housing allowance, because we've looked at not just the mortgage but rate and rental costs of housing, and the difference between the local housing allowance and the lowest price property in the area. I mean, you can't rent anything for the local housing allowance, and that's an increasing concern. So it's something that we're campaigning with government to try and look at increasing that as some way to mitigate against the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Sean Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, well, the Household Support Fund Scheme, is there another funding of that forthcoming very soon? And if so, is it in the same quantities as it was previously, as in, obviously we're coming to the cold part of the year, and I know we were supporting people with their heating and their food previously, because I know the numbers were quite high with the previous tranche. So is there more money coming, do you know?
I'm not aware of any additional government money coming. I suspect not. I mean, the last tranche is supposed to last until March, end of March next year. Whether it does last that long, it's hard to tell at this stage. But it's interesting because normally summer is a quieter time for Citizens Advice, and we have less problems. This year there's been no let up at all, and people have still been coming for that emergency support. Again, part of Citizens Advice campaigning is for social tariffs on energy with energy companies. I think any support is likely, if it does come, to be more targeted rather than the support through the Household Support Fund. But I've no inside knowledge on that at all, so you never know.
Okay. Any further questions from anyone? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I know you guys, as everyone, does an incredible job, and thank you for what you're doing, especially at this tough time at the coalface. Next on my list, I've got Mags Mercer from the Hope Hub. Mags, hello, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Just turning to page 9 in your pack, I've just given a brief background and overview, as was the request. So the Hope Hub exists for the relief of poverty, and we support anyone aged 18 plus who is homeless or at risk of becoming so, unemployed, struggling with their mental health and or addictions. And so our role is very much about sort of serving those on the very fringes of society. And so, on one side of Surrey Heath, you've got, the very high people with mortgages, but actually that there is quite a big cohort of people who are in the lower end and have got some significant challenges that they struggle with. And that's the cohort of people that we support. So we, since opening in 2018, our services have been accessed about 40,000 times, and we have supported just under 1,100 vulnerable people in the borough. So you can see that year on year that there is a consistent need for the types of services that we provide. Like with Citizens Advice and the funding that we get from Surrey Heath Borough Council, we very gratefully receive, and it's actually the fundamental building block, if you like, the brick, the starting brick, which other trust and grant funders and other statutory providers look for, because they need to be assured that we are providing a required service and we are supported and recognised by the statutory authority. In terms of numbers, turning to page 10, we're very much an organisation that's partnership focused. We work with absolutely everybody. We work with all the statutory bodies, from NHS to the Police and Crime Commissioner, Surrey County Council, and we piloted in 19 to 20 a assertive outreach programme for people with multiple disadvantages. So they would be people with mental health that have been homeless, they've been perhaps through the care system, they're long-term unemployed, and have probably had some form of addiction, past, present, or seeking to recover. And that programme is now called Changing Futures, and some of you may well, of course, be aware of it. And Surrey is one of 15 local authorities, counties across the country that is delivering this programme, and the Hope Hub is a partner amongst that alliance in Surrey. And it's proving to be a very successful programme because the people that we support in that programme require extensive support. So we're talking 8 hours a week, intensive support. And so that programme funds 2 full-time people for us, which operates Monday to Saturday. Other than that, our general service users, so last year we supported 212 people aged 18 to 73. And on average, our services per person were accessed 42 times each. And through the doors, that's drop-ins, over 2,500. And we sourced and served over 3,500 meals from the day service. We gave out 500 food parcels. We supported 78 people who were of no fixed abode into accommodation, and outreach just about 500 times across the borough. And also supported 24 people into employment through our training and employment programme, and mentored 197 course completers on digital upskilling, IT and cooking. And our Living Well workshops and activities, we had 225 attendances, and they have proven to be such a lifeline for vulnerable cohort that we serve. So they learn new skills. So people that don't necessarily have a social media account, or they don't know how to do it safely, they don't know how to set up an email, maybe they want to connect with a family who lives abroad, and they've not been able to do that. And they also come on stream and they learn things and they get certificates, and we like to celebrate that, and so they get a certificate and we give them a round of applause and we ring our bell and so on. And it's been incredible to witness and see the change in people's lives as they transform and progress through the services pathway that we provide. We do find that the cost of living is a real challenge, and it is exacerbating people's mental health further. Had to do an analysis recently for the NHS, and we were able to demonstrate that in 2019, when we first received some funding for them for a mental health caseworker, that at that time 19 out of 100 people we saw had a diagnosed mental health need, and now that is 85 out of 100 service users we see have a mostly diagnosed mental health need. So that is the change in dynamic in the vulnerable cohort we serve. So that means that we are having to support them more intensely for longer, and their turnaround time, is going to be longer. Or they may fall off and become what we call a revolving door, and they'll get so far and then they'll fall over again. So it's quite challenging and very busy and very intense support work that the team deliver. We also have the emergency accommodation service, and that property is owned by Surrey Heath Borough Council. It's in Gordon Avenue. Some of you might drive by. Hopefully you'll always see that it looks very pretty and we keep it very nice. So that provides a 6-bedroom accommodation service, and typically people with a local connection can access that, provided they can be loan worked. Because that is obviously a requirement from a safety point of view. And typically they stay there for 6 to 8 weeks, and during that time they engage in our day services, and we support them through the services pathway and the day services, hopefully into safe, secure accommodation that is permanent and or training and or employment. We love it when we get a triple win, but it doesn't always happen. That's a quick whiz through some of the things that go on at the Hope Hub. And do feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mags. It's quite scary, those figures around mental health. You ought to just tap your button for me. It's quite scary, that rise around mental health. It's quite an eye-opener. And the revolving piece as well. That's a real worry, particularly obviously as you've got that cost of living crisis and those people who are tipping over from not having enough money to then losing their home and other things. It's quite scary. And members, do we have any questions? Councillor Ying-Parrott.
Yes, just to check, between a diagnosis suspected of a mental health issue and getting an actual diagnosis, how long does it take? Because I know in NHS it takes there's a huge queue for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the process is that if they present and we work with them and can identify some triggers which indicate some mental health need, we will support them and encourage them to secure, firstly, a GP assessment. So that's the first stage. And quite often we will accompany them to that if they are nervous or uncertain in any way. Sometimes we find that people are on the wrong medication. So we have to work with GP, hospital, mental health services, social services, adult services, it's quite long and complicated, the process. And a mental health needs assessment doesn't necessarily identify that their needs marry up with what we believe they are. And that is a piece of work which we would like to see addressed. And it was certainly analysed, sadly, at a coroner's inquiry through one service user who was long-term service user with us, and he sadly died. And they identified that had some of the statutory services listened to the highlights we put in our reporting, then it might have been a different outcome. So it is complicated and it's not easy.
How long on average?
Depends. It's a bit like how long is a piece of string, because it depends on the individual and it depends where they're engaging with services. We do find Upper Gordon Road, because that has the homeless GP contract, if you like, they are the best starting post. So we start with them, and then we have to jump through all the various hoops. The challenge is that if somebody is also using a substance at any level, they are very reluctant or not or won't receive them in for mental health support. So we have to look to things which we do with them. We refer them to sort of things like Talk Plus. We will get some counsellors to come in. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give a specific because there just isn't one. I wish there was. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Murray Rowlands.
Yes, Chairman. Knowing that building that you use, it has I feel a use by date which probably about 10 years ago. I just wondered whether the rather dilapidated state of the building really encumbers you in any way in the work you do. I'm sure you're getting by it, but it leaves much to be desired, doesn't it?
Thank you, Murray. We love our building. CAB were there for 10 years. So yes, of course it is sort of past their sell-by date, but the surveyors have had a good look over it. I think it was last year, Nick, and the steel frame that's the supporting structure is sound. The roof has been repatched in the various areas it needs to be. And I have to say that Keith Rann, who I used to work with actually at Bratton Forest Homes, he's great and he's very helpful when we have a whoopsie with the building. I mean, on the whole, honestly, it's been amazing. It gives us about 3,000 square foot. We have, all the facilities that we need because we were able to get it refurbished to what we need as a crisis drop-in centre and an empowerment centre with an IT zone. And we've got the meeting rooms we need. It would be ideal if we could just peel off the sides and have some new sides. But unfortunately, I don't think that's possible. But yeah, we do keep a close eye on it, and yeah, we're just thankful that it stays dry, and it's okay at the moment.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sean Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Max, two things. One, the one pot cooking, which I know was quite successful. Are there any plans to carry that on if you've got the funds to get more one pots? And second one is, I think it was last year, maybe this year, there was one gentleman that was seen all over town, and everywhere you looked, he was there. And residents kept saying, there's this homeless man, he keeps moving around, is no one looking to support him? I know that you guys tried to support him as much as you could, and under those circumstances, for whatever reason, that gentleman wasn't going to be supported. And I think it's key that people realise that we were aware of him, you were aware of him, and he was being looked after. Is that gentleman now sorted? Has he moved on?
Can I just, we're getting into very specific individual
I'm not
cases.
specifically talking about a person. I want to make sure that there was
I appreciate that in a public setting that person could be identified. I just want to be a little bit careful we don't skate on the wrong side of things. Perhaps have that direct conversation with Mags, if that's okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, shall I address the one pot cooking? And I'll come back to you.
I'll speak to you after.
Yes, the one pot cooking was a very successful programme. We secured some funding through Surrey County Council, through their food strategy, having run affordable cookery for the previous couple of years. And 60 residents benefited from receiving the training. They also got a one pot cooking facility suitable for their household, whether that was one person or four. We ran it at Old Dean, St Michael's, one from the house and one from the Hope Hub day service, and we would love to run some more. It comes complete with a training pack which our wonderful project officer creates, and a series of menus. And it's a really, really worthwhile programme, and we'd love to run it again.
Of course you can.
Thank you. What's stopping you from running it again?
Direct funding for it.
Fine. Ask me to give you some funding of my council grant money. I haven't got much left, but you can have some of that, and I'm sure there might be other people in the room that I know from personal experience that it was really successful, and I will happily donate some of my funds to you for that moving forward.
Thank you, Sean.
That's a very generous offer there, Councillor Sean. Thank you. Any further questions? Nope. Okay. Oh, Councillor Sean MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thanks ever so much for the comprehensive report. It was both inspiring and sobering at the same time. And for the fantastic work that you're doing, but also maybe your voluntary colleagues on the right-hand side, which I avoided commenting on before. One thing that struck me reviewing the data was 20% BAME is totally wacko compared to the ethnicity that we have within the borough. I'm just wondering if you could give us any insights into what you see there.
No, we have found that year on year, the BAME rates that engage with the Hope Hub have been around that figure, fairly static. And we have typically, the cohort we serve, circa 75-80% are white British.
But it's relatively disproportionate to what we see in the rest of the borough, I think, although somebody's be happy to correct me in terms of the blend that we have. So 20% is quite high relative to the borough. I'm just wondering if there's any further insights into why that might be. That was where I was coming from.
No, honestly, okay. We're open to all. We have all sorts, and we welcome all, and we serve all.
Thank you. Mags, thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for what you do. Your team are awesome. Thank you very much. So I'm going to attempt to pronounce this name, and I hope I get it right. So it's Solette Shepherdson and Helen Fry from Voluntary Support North Surrey. Have I got that right? Save me.
It's Helen Frary, but that's fine. Yes.
My apologies.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us this evening. Here representing Voluntary Support North Surrey.
unlike our colleagues that you've just heard from, we are not a charity delivering direct services by and large. We're an infrastructure organisation. We're the council of voluntary service that represents Surrey Heath Borough, and our job is to support and grow the third sector. So charities that are in this room and charities that are not in this room, small and medium-sized usually, rather than the large charities. In order to do so, we do all sorts of things in terms of supporting their boards to make sure that they've got sizable boards and help them with board recruitment, and helping them ensure that they're on the right side of the charity commission, offering free training around charity law and free training around fundraising, and in addition to fundraising training, giving them one-to-one support in identifying grants and funds, and issuing bi-weekly bulletins around new funds that have come available. Our main job, if you like, is to make sure that we have a robust and resilient third sector, so our residents can seek the help that they need in addition to statutory services. We work with businesses to ensure that this is achieved as well in the borough. One of our key aims is to recruit volunteers. I'm not suggesting that we do all of the recruitment of volunteers, but we work with the charities so that they can understand the messages that they need to share with their volunteers. And we give, again, training on how to manage volunteers and the law. And we help to scope volunteer opportunities where the need is and share these opportunities with our audience via social media and bulletins. We help the organisations freely to build websites when they need a website. We have someone in-house that does this, and generally we administer funds on behalf of the charities too. We have our own small fund, and we also administer funds on behalf of Surrey County Council, as written in the report. So in addition to acting as an infrastructure organisation, we also do run a small befriending scheme, Time to Talk, in conjunction with the scheme that you'll hear about later this evening from Surrey Heath Age Concern. And we have about 50 volunteers at any one time supporting maybe 60 or 70 clients on a monthly basis. I don't know if Helen, my chair, wants to add anything. That's fine. No. I'm very happy to take any questions. I did give you quite a lengthy report. I exceeded the two-page limit. Apologies.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, I have a question. So one of the organisations, I think, gets 3-year funding and the others get 1-year chunks of funding. Talk me through the benefits, or are there any benefits of having longer tranches of committed funding, say 2 or 3 years? Tell me what the pros and cons are.
We only get 1-year funding, and always, I think that's perhaps similar to other organisations, always have got 1-year funding. But obviously the benefits to us are obvious in terms of you can plan. If you've got more core funding, you can commit to staff and to their projects. We work very often on 1-year and 2-year projects. And the other benefits, of course, are time, not having to write applications, come to present and share our plans quite so regularly.
So how much time is involved in an annual cycle of bidding or applying for a grant, ballpark, for an organisation, typically, say, of your size?
It's not a huge amount of time, I would suggest, but it probably takes, I would say 16 hours of time to do the research, to put together a decent report, to get it through your board. Because if you were if we were submitting something, I'm the CEO, I wouldn't submit it without my whole board having a look at it as well. So it's all of their time. So it adds up. And we're doing this not just in Surrey Heath. So we spend a lot of our time putting together reports and applications. which we would like to deliver frontline organisation.
And maybe just to add to that, that's the same amount of time that would go into writing a 2 or 3 year funding proposal. So we could spend exactly the same amount of time, but it would be a 3-year plan rather than 1 or 2. But I think, just to emphasise Salet's point, one of the biggest challenges we have, and this has already been mentioned, is recruiting and retaining quality staff. And if we want to bring in the best, and we can only offer them a 1-year, contract because we don't have funding beyond that year, that really, puts the handcuffs on us in terms of the people that we can recruit.
This is interesting. Kate from Citizens Advice has popped her hand up. Are you all right if she asks a question? Kate.
It's not so much a question, I'm just supporting the idea for 3-year funding because of the problems of recruiting people with the right skills, we're finding that we're having to recruit people and train them from scratch. And often it can take 6 months to get somebody to the level to deliver the job that you want them to. And then you've only got 6 months, and if they're aware that there's no further funding or no definite funding after that, they may well leave in that time to look for something else. So really having 3-year funding makes such a difference because you have got some security and you can bring people on and develop them, knowing that there is, there's a plan and that they have longevity and more sustainability.
Thank you. Mags, did you put your hand up?
Only again to endorse and agree, staff retention is critical because we're all working with, in the charity sector, which is, a low paid sector compared to commercial rates. And people generally have got a passion for what they do, and they do a great job, but you have to be able to offer them some security. They need security to know they have got a job beyond 12 months.
Okay. This is a very popular one. Pete Nyman from Camberley and District Job Club.
Can you hear me? Right. I'd just like to endorse that. I mean, we're in a position where we want to make certain developments which would improve our ability, for example, to raise funds. But to actually do that without knowing if you're actually going to exist on April the 1st, 2024, because of the nature of what most of our costs are, is very difficult. And you feel like you don't know which direction you're facing. Are you reporting back what you've done and you're planning for what you hope to do? And it is very, very difficult to do it on 1 year's funding, which I'll talk about when we do our thing anyway.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Yung-Parrott.
Not so much as a question, but just to say that, yes, it would be a waste of money if they only have 1 year's funding and train the person, only have the person to leave, and it would be a drain on the resources. Whatever funding that they are getting from the people, from the associations of people. So it's crucial to have a longer term plan. Just agreeing with them.
You're welcome, thank you. And thank you very much. And obviously, thank you for the support you provide in the background for organisations, because we know legal frameworks and those other bits, the scaffolding that supports those organisations is something that quite often isn't seen, because you see the front end delivery, but that scaffolding is really important to make sure that delivery is solid. Thank you. So I've now got James Taylor from the Basingstoke Canal Authority. James.
Thank you, Chairman. So, slight change of pace, different sector, it's a more environmental sector. The Basingstoke Canal Authority is the local authority partnership that manages the 32-mile-long Basingstoke Canal on behalf of the 2 local authority owners, Surrey and Hampshire County Councils. It's a partnership made up of the 2 county councils, 6 district and borough councils along the way of the distance of the canal, including your authority. And and we are supported and advised by other stakeholders such as the Basingstoke Canal Society, the supporters and campaigners for the restoration of the canal, who are a registered charity. They provide us with many thousands of hours of volunteer input to managing the canal, and we couldn't manage without their help. I think the core thing about the canal is it is a doorstep green space for many, many thousands of people. And we found that out very well during the COVID pandemic when we saw people exercising in their allotted time spaces, and the numbers on the towpath went up about 3 times from their normal levels. They've fallen back a little, but possibly not as much as before the pandemic, which is an interesting point. The canal is largely free to use, and that is certainly for walking and cycling. It's a blue-green space where people can come and recreate, takes time out, get close to nature, and that is obviously very important for people's health and mental well-being, as we've been hearing from some of the other partners. One of the key roles of the Canal Authority is actually to provide a safe and welcoming canal for those people, those many thousands of visitors that are coming to join us. One of their key roles is about maintaining the man-made waterway and making sure that the water stays where it's supposed to be and isn't flooding people's homes. So a key for us is to making sure that our ranger staff, we have the right number of ranger staff, well-trained ranger staff on duty 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to make sure that the water stays where it's supposed to be and the canal assets are kept safe. I did mention it's a very important site for nature conservation as well. The entire length within your borough is a site of special scientific interest. Primarily this is for the very unusual water plants and a high number of dragonflies and damselflies that inhabit the canal. Also the canal is a community. We see it as very much as a community asset. And I did mention volunteers. Regularly, we return about 20,000 volunteer hours a year of people working in a huge variety of different ways on the waterway. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, James. You just tap your mic button for me. Fantastic. Members, do we have any questions? Oh, Councillor Mary Glarat.
Yeah, I'd just like to know, first of all, what proportion, what percentage of the canal goes through Surrey Heath? And also, how many paid employees do you have?
I can't tell you the precise percentage of the canal, but it's roughly, I would say, around about 1/5 of the canal. In terms of paid employees, we have 6 rangers and a number of 3 full part-time members of staff who look after the visitor centre at Mitchett. We also should have an operations manager, but we currently don't have that. She left earlier in the year, and that's a vacant role at the moment.
Councillor Sean MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all aware it's a fantastic resource, so thanks ever so much for being the custodian of it. We really appreciate it in the borough, and I know beyond the borough as well. Could you give us any insights into the specific challenges you're facing as we see changes to our weather patterns in the management of the canal?
Yes, I'm sure some of you live in the local area, so we were extremely challenged by water supply. Now, this has been a feature of the canal since its inception. I think the original proprietors of the canal thought they could get away without building a summit reservoir. Most canals have, and it's plagued the canal ever since. But obviously, climate change is affecting us, and we're getting more extremes of weather. So not only sort of last year we had a drought, a very prolonged dry period, right from November 21 right through to the autumn of 22, where a section of the borough was actually unnavigable for the first time since the canal was restored because we ran out of water. Equally, where we get heavy rainfall, it tends to run off and into the canal much more because there's a lot more developed land around the canal these days than there was when it was constructed. So yes, we do have challenges in terms of high volumes of water entering the canal and being able to attenuate those and making sure we don't make other people's problems worse. So we do need to trim those water levels in advance of predicted heavy rainfall, and that's something we do on an active daily basis to make sure that we are a large attenuation over the whole 32 miles of canal.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? I've got to say it's a pretty cool asset that we've got and brings joy both to those that walk along it, the mental health piece. I know a number of people who've benefited just from the ability to just go out and have those walks, which is really crucial. I believe you've got a boat called the Pinkerton, which seems a very popular boat. I think certainly some of the teas on it seem to get sort of quite rave reviews. So thank you for your time there. Thank you. So I now need to find. There's always a moment when you put the wrong piece of paper down, and there's always someone to save you. Sally, you're amazing. Thank you. So it's Blackwater Valley Countryside Partnership next.
Yeah, okay, Steve Bailey. Apologies for being late. I had another meeting that clashed, so thanks for putting me on later. So we're a similar organisation to the canal. In fact, we're a partnership of local authorities, and we work along the River Blackwater, which stretches from Farnham, and our main area of work goes up to nearly Swallowfield. So that's, quite close to Reading. Most of our work, though, is concentrated, and the reason we were set up, and we were set up over 50 years ago, was to deal with the urban fringe problems that were occurring in the area. The things like the gravel workings and the need to restore them and bring them into some sort of public benefit, landfill sites that often followed on from the gravel workings. And there were quite a few sort of backyard industries and remnants of the army working in the area that perhaps weren't so pleasant. So we've been working on that, trying to turn the valley into a pleasant area to use for the local population, and to get that population involved in their work and try and see through what their ambitions for that area are. So we work very closely, as James was talking about the canal, a similar model. We're working very closely with volunteers. We've set groups up on some sites, and the ones we've just helped groups who have already been set up. So we support 10 volunteer groups throughout the area. We also run our own sort of flying group to hit those sites in the valley that don't have a group. One of the groups we actually set up was a charity called the Blackwater Valley Countryside Trust, and that's the meeting I've just been attending earlier today. And we set that group up to try and get at funds that the local partnership body, as we ourselves are, weren't allowed to apply for, or found it harder to get funds from the local business sector, etc. And that group has raised something like £300,000 for projects, and that's not just for us as an organisation, but for other organisations working in the valley to those same aims of developing the countryside. So they not only do they raise funds, but they also help to organise events. And because they're a community organisation themselves, they're very good at contacting other areas in the community and promoting the valley itself. The core funding that Surrey Heath and other authorities go on basically is the core funding to keep the organisation going. We also do work for extra work for partners on sites managed. So what we've found as we've dealt with, say, a problematical site, an old landfill site, and brought it into something that's pleasant, we're putting footpaths in for people to use that site, the partner would say, oh, by the way, can you look after it for us? So we've had to take that role on, and we've been, in more recent years, because we've been successful in that role of looking after sites and developing sites and setting them up, the SANG programme, we've ended up being involved in that very closely. I assume you all have heard the term SANG. Am I getting nods right? I won't repeat there.
It's probably worth expanding that acronym.
Right, okay. SANG is called, it's an acronym, it means Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. And it's alternative to the heathlands around, we're all surrounded by. Your name is Heath, Heath. It surrounds the whole Blackwater Valley, and it has restricted the planning legislation around that. Means that any housing development that's going on and increasing the local population needs to take account of the effect they'll have on the heathlands and the biodiversity, especially the bird life on those areas. And the biggest sort of problem with that is people accessing the site, cyclists, walkers, and especially people with dogs, because the dogs, basically the birds see the dogs as predators and won't nest there, or the dogs actually can disturb the birds. So even without predating on the nests, they're stopping the birds breeding there. So by creating suitable sites nearby for people to use, that gets over the problem. And in fact, I think, although it's because of the reason, the planning history, the reason for it is one reason. The actual benefit to the local population is meaning we're setting up a whole load of new green space in this local area that is funded by developers. And we can, we work on about 20, 30 sites around the valley now, of which probably half of those are SANGs, and we're getting funding in either through development, which is sites owned by the local authorities, or they're actually being taken on by other organisations, and we're getting funding through that to manage those of those sites. So basically, we carry on, we look after the sites, and we involve local people in doing that work, and we still identifying extra projects for some of the black spots in the valley. There's one or two that stick around, but especially in the local years, we're more on the biodiversity value sites and the Environment Act that's coming up and putting a duty onto local authorities to conserve biodiversity. But we've been doing that for 50 years, but that's intensifying with the new Environment Act as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Johnny Cope.
Thanks. Just a really quick one. Just in the report, it talks about 4 meadow enrichment projects and 3 tree planting projects. I just wanted to check are any of those in Surrey Heath, and could you expand on them if they are? Tell us a bit more about it.
None of those are in Surrey Heath, but what we have been doing in Surrey Heath, in fact my colleague was on site today, was the SANG that's called Water's Edge, and it's a SANG that isn't owned by the local authority, it's still owned by the developer, but I don't think they're managing it at all. And so rather than moaning to your planning department to say, enforce it, we've been speaking to them to see if we can actually take on the management of that site for them. We also support a couple of volunteer groups in the area. The Friends are from the allotments. Surrey Heath Tree Wardens, who help on some of our sites, but we also help them on other sites within Surrey Heath, just Warren Wood.
Thank you. Right, to tap your button, Steve. Just on your microphone. Fantastic. Any further questions? No. It was fascinating to read in the report. I noticed at least 100,000 of the visits will be from residents of Surrey Heath, and of course that means that residents are visiting more than once. They're going back there as well, which I think is really important. And again, it's about getting out into those open spaces and having that opportunity to have that time to think, and that mental health piece is so crucial. Those things are sort of so intertwined, aren't they? So I have my piece of paper back. I put it under something else. Thank you, Eddie, for saving me there, and Sally. And next we've got Surrey Heath Age Concern. So we've got Charles Barber, and no stranger to this chamber, Sarah Jane Croak. Welcome back. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, councillors, and thank you, Chair. It's quite amazing to be sat here on the other side working with a voluntary organisation. So when you're sat there and you're hearing this, it is different when you're working in it, and I can 100% tell you that. While we are sort of sat here and we're later on in the agenda, I have scribbled even more notes of things that have been brought up. I'll just read our mission statement. You've probably all gone through the report anyway, but our mission is to prevent loneliness and isolation amongst the elderly. Most of the residents we support are actually elderly on their own, so they have lost a partner. These people have suffered with social isolation and they lose a network. A lot of these people have been caring for a partner. Within that, you're in your own bubble and you lose your social network that you had as a couple. And then when that person either moves on to a care home or unfortunately that person dies, you then are left and wonder, what's just happened? Where are my friends? What do I do now? So we have become a little bit of a stopgap for people that are on a continued journey. As we all know, there are more people, elderly people, living longer now than what they were before. COVID has brought that up, even more people that have been in social isolation that we didn't know about, and obviously people that have passed on. We do a visiting and befriending service. That can be either via telephone call or a visit to people's homes. And just to give you an idea, we have 50 volunteers that give 2 hours plus a week. And that could be the one visit that person gets. So they might not get a call from family, they might be completely on their own. We need more of that, but we just can't give it. We haven't got the hours. It's recruiting more volunteers and it's still money. So that is just one service alone that we give. Obviously, if you look through the other things that we do, we kindly have the Rainbow CAF premises that the council give us. So thank you, along with the revenue grant, which again we couldn't do without. The Rainbow CAF has now become more of a community CAF, a community hub. It used to be seen as more for over 65s. That has now changed. The cost of living has also helped the Rainbow CAF because we're keeping our prices as low as possible. So we've seen, especially over the summer holidays, families coming in, a mum coming in with their kids that can sit down and eat and have something substantial, which I'm sure you agree means a lot. We do our weekly afternoon tea parties, which is like a vintage tea party, which includes scones and cream, which are delicious. We've been doing our weekly agility classes as well, so we've partnered up with Places and Leisure. We're seeing an increase with that. We work to the Otago system, which is for strength and balance within the elderly. So again, that's helping keeping them more upright and capable in their own homes, and not as many falls, which again is a good thing. We do a monthly cinema club, which we hold with Avery, which was Signature Homes, which is now Avery. They are amazing. They've been supporting us with that, and they also do a fish and chip luncheon with us as well. And that sees maybe 20, 25, and again, we could do with more space because there are people on the waiting list. We also do a monthly Sunday tea group where volunteers open up their houses. We have volunteers that drive residents to people's homes and they sit and have a tea party, sit and chat, which again is brilliant. Again, it comes down to funding. We have 5 part-time members of staff. Probably equates to about 2.5 full-timers. I do 3 days a week. I do more than 3 days a week, and I've only been there
3 days.
No, I've been there.
3 days.
I've been there a couple of months now, and I tell you,
there is not enough hours in the day to run a charity. We're only a small charity. I've also taken on the fundraising role, so we've currently got out about £78,000 worth of bids. They're not guaranteed to come in, but we've got to keep trying. We are now doing more collaborations with businesses, so we're looking at other ways of fundraising, sponsorship, donors. We have our own fundraising team now, so we do small events. Again, because there's only a small few of us, trying to organise anything bigger is quite difficult. So we're doing the best we can with what we've got. I'll move to Charles and see if I've left anything out and you want to add.
That's very good. Shall I? That's got it, yeah. Good evening, everyone. Won't take long. Just to reinforce, I think the visiting and befriending service has been going for many, many years, and it's a vital service. I think it's at a point, really, that we get from social prescribers notification that someone has got a big problem. They're getting very, very lonely, leading towards being depressed, perhaps. So, we can help with that, with providing volunteers. A lot of effort goes into matching people, so there's a friendship that will work, and generally very successfully. But outside of that, really, the challenge is how do you actually prevent people getting to that stage? And that's really what we've been working on since COVID really has closed down. We've been working hard to try and find to sort of tempt people in, if you like, that are in that lonely position to, as you've said, to provide that network, that opportunity. And it's fascinating to see the way people find they've got links with each other and all sorts of relationships sort of build up. And it's very successful. We don't really have a lot of premises. We have the tiny Rainbow Cafe, so we have to partner. And that's very exciting to sort of try and find the resources in the borough and those organisations that are willing to welcome us in and work together. So that's really what I wanted to say. So we've grown the whole thing, I think, quite a lot.
Sorry, I meant to say places and leisure we work with obviously with the agility class, which is fantastic, obviously using that space. We have also a men's breakfast club, which I forgot to mention. So that we are now getting about 25 men on their own that are coming, which again is another thing that is vital, that they need to come and share, have support. And then from that, they normally come to the curry club or they'll come to something else. So it's that linking and that networking that constantly happens. And one other exciting thing that I'll end on is we are up for the King's Award. We are 1 in 3 in Surrey, and we find out in November for our services to the community. Open for questions.
Well, congratulations on being up for an award. That's really cool. And of course, that loneliness piece post-COVID, particularly with the elderly. I remember knocking on a lady's door. It was 2001. It was the first human that wasn't a delivery driver she'd spoken to since the first lockdown. That was a humbling moment, and I spent 20 minutes there because she wanted me to stay. And what you do is so crucial there. It's so important. Members, do we have questions? I think Charles, an opportunity to save me. Quick final comment. Oh, Councillor Sean Garrett's jumped in to save me. Thank you, Sean.
Obviously, you mentioned COVID, and I know that the number of befrienders, as well as the residents you were helping, obviously dropped because of COVID, because a lot of them are in that age bracket. Are we struggling with befrienders now, or are we back up? Because I know there was a waiting list, and there was a waiting list of people that were wanting to be on as well. And secondly, I would highly recommend the Curry Club, which is run on a monthly basis. It is a very, very good night out, and I'm sure that it will be shared on social media moving forward.
Yeah, I think we built back up really on our volunteering base for visiting befriending. We're just coming up to 50. It has been a struggle. It did wipe out a number of people in a number of volunteering roles, particularly the elder people stepped back, found they couldn't come out anymore. So it's been quite a challenging 18 months. But I think in terms of volunteers, we're doing pretty well by using a mixture of the traditional media, the new media, the social media has worked very well. But it is a continuing battle, and I think we do find that there's an awful lot of social prescribers out there these days. Actually, that's something that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years. It's a very good service, but there's a lot of social prescribing going on, and we do have to work quite hard to make sure that we manage very carefully the people that we can take on. Yeah. It's really important for our volunteers who are not specifically trained for taxing mental issues or dementia, for example. So we find quite a lot of our time actually doing some filtering. That's been a recent addition.
And signposting.
Signposting. But we're hitting that 50 mark now, and we have one specialist who does about 2.5 days a week. And really, they can't really cope with any more than 50 successfully because they're looking after a relationship with the individual and also the volunteer. It's a very human issue. Interaction. And we're there as a backup to the volunteer. So if they feel there's issues, it could be on any front, they have someone to refer to and they can be a go-between and help to sort the problems out. And there's a limit to how far you can go with that. It is quite a stressy sort of area in that respect. But generally the relationships are there for life. It's a bit of a sad thing in a way, but it is a very special thing that grows. I hope that helps.
No, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do. Any further questions? Oh, yes. Salam.
Mine's maybe not so much a question, or maybe it is, but I would suggest in Surrey Heath, with Surrey Heath Age Concern and Time to Talk, that we never advertise that we've got befriending services, because we can only just really keep up with these very small numbers that we've got from the social prescribers, and we've both got waiting lists. But were we actually to say, excuse me, are you lonely? Would you like someone to come and visit you? We would be inundated, and there's a real need out there that's not being met in terms of loneliness. And I don't have to say to you the statistics around, it's worse for your health than smoking cigarettes to be lonely. It's one of the top 5 things to keep you well, along with exercise and good diet, is community, and loneliness is right up there at the moment. And I don't think it's, I think the Age Concern is doing a fantastic job in this community, but scratching the surface.
Thank you for that. I agree entirely with you on that. And I mean, and just on the funding issue, and I think it's an issue that if you're trying to extend a friendship, and I guess this happens in other areas, it's very difficult to sort of say to someone, do you need a friend? Okay, it's a £5 a week. It doesn't quite work. So it needs to be a give service. Yeah. That's my view. How we actually attract people in who are very reticent to come out, very independent, the British, very independent. We do it to ourselves to some extent. So the whole thing really is, how do you actually attract people in, and how do you cope with financially supporting that activity? That's our big challenge. And the 3-year approach would be brilliant, because if we're ever looking over a precipice, you never know where you are, what's going to come in next. You wouldn't run a business like it, I don't think, for long anyway. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Kate.
Just a quick comment. I think that they provide an invaluable service, and certainly around 45% of the clients we see have either got a long-term health condition or a disability. Many of those have mental health issues, but a lot of them are housebound and struggle to get out. So having a befriending service is so important to people, and being able to sort of engage with that. Otherwise, they are so isolated.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. So last but by no means least, it's Camberley and District Job Club. Welcome. Pete, obviously you've already spoken briefly, so welcome back. And Sharon Hall as well, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Last but not least, well, we are a very small organisation, so in some ways we are aware that we're a very small organisation, and we're working on very, very narrow margins. The smaller you are, the less flexibility you've actually got with the money you get, and that's something that we find very difficult when we are having to apply on an annual basis. Unfortunately, unemployment and events don't seem to follow a calendar like everything else does. And so when we held our job fair last May, it became the most complicated bookkeeping, because that was based on money we'd got in the previous year. And it did become very complicated. Now, if it had 2 years, but anyway, I'm not complaining. I mean, the borough has supported us very well over the last number of years, but it is complicated. I think it's very interesting what I've just heard, because I could reflect the whole thing. We used to be predominantly an organisation, probably for men in their 40s and 50s, who had been out of the employment market for a long time, or had been made redundant because of technological change. And there was no effective retraining available at that time. And that was like that pretty much until COVID, which hit us like a sort of steam train. And our whole model had to be completely changed from a sort of drop-in session, which could get a tiny bit chaotic at times because we weren't ever sure how many people were coming in, to an appointment-based system. And during COVID, we continued working as far as we could at a distance. And we were seeing people, not seeing in the metaphorical sense, we were seeing people over the phone, etc. So that's what we run, an appointment system now, and it seems to work, which we're very happy having made that change. I need to apologise to people here that you never saw our report when some of the others came out. I've no idea why that happened, so I apologise if you feel you haven't had enough time to sort of see some of the information in the report. I'd also ask you to, if you want to find out more, there was an impact assessment we made out in the last financial year, which has got a lot of what I regard as quite pretty diagrams about our connections with other voluntary organisations, etc. That must be in the file there, someone to actually see that. But unfortunately, or fortunately for some people, there's been a considerable change of councillors since when I filled that out to what is now. So there's something there. Councillor Cope asked a question about trends, and I think that was really important actually, because we've got some trends that become obvious. We're getting more women coming in now. And that may be because we've got an appointment system that people feel more secure in coming. More women as a higher percentage of our clients. We no longer necessarily have an absolute core of 40 to 50-year-old men as such. There are some, obviously, but we're getting more young people coming in, and they've got fundamentally different needs. We had a working relationship with the workshop in Camberley, and we did some stuff that they weren't able to do. We had young people. We have had various waves of people from retail closures, which we've tried to be proactive about. And before he was elected a councillor, Councillor Rowlands was very, very active in making those contacts. And we got waves of people coming through, which we tried our best with. We also have had an interesting experience with when we've got people coming to Britain as refugees. We always had a smattering of people who came seeking asylum, but we have had more people from the Bangladeshi community have particular problems, including the women in particular about speaking English. But we had an interesting experience on Monday, which we reopened after our break in August. Of our clients who came in that day, we had someone from Namibia, someone who was from Hong Kong, and a couple, a delightful couple from El Salvador. and...
All refugees.
Sorry?
They're all refugees.
And they were all refugees at some point or other. And this is something we're doing our best to cope with. The biggest thing we had, which I'm very proud of, is the contacts we established with the Ukrainian refugees. And I thank councillors who gave us some money. We got a Ukrainian who could translate and came in. So we had that as a regular thing for a number of time. And she also was looking for work, which she's got now as well, which is great. I also heard on Monday that one of our long-term clients, who I think might be coming to us for about 5 years, Murray can correct me if I'm wrong, that he has actually got a job. So sometimes what we do in 1 year isn't the full story of what we're able to achieve. We just stick at it as far as we can and do our best. I have to reiterate also the length of time it takes us to bid for money. We do it. We've had money from the Frimley fuel allotments. We've had money from the Community Foundation. And we've got the money the regular money that we've had from the borough. And we also have been generously helped by individual councillors, which has been absolutely invaluable. And that sort of brings me to the very last point on the report is, yes, I think we would like to do an expansion of our activities. And we need a sound financial base to do it. And because of the nature of how we operate, we need a revenue grant because of that, because that's the actual, the cornerstone of what we can do, our activities we can do. We're very happy to go out and find money from various places, which we have done in the past. But the revenue makes up a significant amount of what we do. We don't have our own premises. I don't know how we could work that. And therefore we have to hire premises. And the High Cross Church are very generous to us, but they've got to survive as well. And so we very much depend at the moment on the revenue grant. We would seek an alternative source for a revenue grant, but as other people here would know, the number of places willing to offer revenue grants is very, very, very small. It's nearly only statutory bodies like the council that would do that. That, I think, is much as I can say. I don't want to take up too much time, but please read our report, and if you want to find any answers from that, just contact us on our email. We'd be very, very happy, or come along on a Monday morning. Give us a little bit of notice, come along on Monday morning and see what we do.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you. You go.
Thank you.
Hi. So yes, I'm Sharon. I work as the vice chair with Pete, and so I've been involved with the Job Club for about 3 years now. I worked as a careers advisor previously, so I did that for about 20 years. Spent quite a lot of time at the Job Club, at the Job Centre in Camberley, so got to see all different types of clients that we were working with. One thing I would like to say is that we have a really keen small group of volunteers who work with us who are incredible. I came from a sort of professional background. I worked in recruitment before that, so I've done a lot of work with people, all different backgrounds. It could be people with sort of offender backgrounds. It could be people who relationships have fallen apart, so the job fell apart. Could have just been economic times that we were going through. In fact, I'm very concerned about the economic times, and I think it's something that we haven't really talked about what's coming down the line, not only from a financial point of view for people paying their bills and mortgages, etc., but I'm very concerned about the employment market as well and where that's going to be going. And I got a feeling that we might end up with seeing a few more people through that route as well. So that I'd done that, and that was my background and experience, but the people that we work with at the Job Club haven't necessarily been through that, but they're just very, very dedicated, and they come along and support the clients in any which way that they can. We do a lot of work with helping clients with job searching. But actually what I'd like to say is I think we're quite good at it, actually, in terms of our success in getting people back into work. If you look at the figures from last year, you know, we saw 119 clients and 35 of those we've helped to support into work. And I would say that that's probably not a bad statistic, really. So we're there to help people every Monday. We help people. Sometimes it's not on a Monday. Sometimes it's outside that. We're over the phone or Zoom from time to time as well. But, you know, we're always there and we always do our best. And I think many of our clients are quite happy with what we help them with. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sharon. Are there any questions? Councillor Sean MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Having lived in a household where my father was unemployed, thank you for the fantastic work you're doing, getting people back to work. It's a very difficult place for people and families. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the revenue grant a few times as being important to your organisation. Could you give us an idea of what percentage of your total revenue it is? Ballpark will be fine.
This is, I've just sort of had a invisible back of an envelope here. Yeah, that's fine. I think it's probably about 60%. So it's a big chunk, and the reason it's the nature of what we do. For example, we've got £2,500 a year worth of hiring costs for accommodation. And we've got someone we employ part-time to coordinate everything, without whom I'm not sure what would happen, actually.
It'd be very difficult.
It'd be very, very difficult. And she's got lots of other jobs as well, but she dedicates time to it. And
she volunteers for us as well.
And she also volunteers
yes,
for doing things and does all sorts of things outside as well. So that would be a rough idea of how much it is.
Thank you. So, question from myself. So, obviously, the latest kind of economic figures, we're seeing a weakening in the jobs market, and we're starting to see some slightly concerning trends there. What are you seeing so far? Because it's really early days in that. Are you expecting the jobs market to weaken? Are you needing to ramp up there for more people needing to find jobs and being unemployed?
I think the answer is we have a habit of, we're quite pessimistic on this sort of thing. There are a number of times over the 11 years we've existed where we've expected a serious move in the jobs market. And those moves haven't always been as big as we expect them to. But it's completely unpredictable. I think that's what I've noticed since I started with the Job Club 11 years ago. Things have become more unpredictable. Could we have predicted 11 years ago that House of Fraser was going to implode? Yeah. And that was a big logo. And I don't think we could have done that. We knew we had secondary sector manufacturing being affected, especially by technology. But what's happened is the tertiary sector, and the tertiary sector is really incredibly unpredictable as to what might happen. We're just hearing today that someone has offered 30 million to save 50 of the Wilko shops. And at this moment, we don't know where those shops are. One keeps your fingers crossed that it isn't your local shop. But yeah, it could very well happen, and we've got to be flexible enough to do that. I think we're happy with the number of volunteers we've got at the moment, but we would probably, if we definitely got signs of this happening, we would be contacting our friends in VSNS to go out and see if we could get some more volunteers. And they've done a good job for us in the past doing that. And there was something else I was about to say, but I've completely forgotten it, so don't worry about it.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Johnny Cope.
Yeah, just a quick one. You talked about seeing more young people. do you also have younger volunteers in place to support them, or how are you adapting to that challenge if the demographic of your volunteers doesn't match the demographic of the people you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a really very interesting question. The demographic of our volunteers does not match the whole demographic of what we're doing. And that's also true in other ways as well. At this moment, we don't have any volunteer from an ethnic minority community either. And so it is an issue. What we've found, though, most of the young people were coming through the Camberley workshop, and therefore we had a fairly specific thing we were doing with them. And there were times when I had a PowerPoint display, and I would often start it by saying, well, before we start, if you think this display looks a little babyish, it's because my background is being a secondary school teacher, and I'm not particularly sophisticated on doing that. But I think that's an extremely good question. We have had one absolutely brilliant volunteer, and she looked after our Facebook page and our website, which, not surprisingly, we were a bit clunky on that. And she was just wonderful, absolutely fantastic. And then she was at university while she was volunteering with us, and then she went and got a first-class degree, and then landed a good job with a good firm of accountants. And so we had to wave goodbye. But it's a very important point, yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. And I think that brings us full circle to the conclusion of your item, Sally, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm assuming that committee is minded to accept the recommendation tabled in front of us unanimously. Agreed. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And that moves us on to the final item on the agenda. Councillor Perrow, I know you had a prior engagement. Do you need to depart? Yes. Thank you so very much for your time this evening. Thank you. Good night.
Sorry, Chair, can I just check the recommendation to vote on? I didn't know what the recommendation was.
To review the report, comment on the updates plan.
Is it worth just referring to the committees to the next steps in terms of having an informal conversation with the fire email or an informal team meeting to see what recommendations that we just
Yes, we can do. Was that on this panel?
It isn't on.
Thank you so much.
Can we definitely do that?
I'll just check this. Yeah, so that was just to review.
Yes, that was just
comments.
yeah, that's
We were just talking about whether or not we should just
Sally.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify to the committee what the next steps for the revenue grant process were. So you've heard the presentations and comments today, read the reports. The next step will be that applications will open later this autumn, and we are working through what exactly that application process would look like, but it's very important that we have applications received at about the same time for our budget build, so that you know that we know what sort of financial commitment is being asked of the council. So applications will open, and then what we're proposing to do is hold an offline meeting where the committee can discuss those applications and decide the recommendations that they will then make to executive in relation to those revenue grants. Are there any questions about that process or anything about that process that the committee would like to ask?
Councillor Sean MacDonald.
I'm going to test the Chair's patience there. Thank you, Chair. excuse my ignorance, but have we considered longer term commitments, and is that something we could consider into the future? Has the work been done previously to discount that idea? Seeing as it was raised multiple times by the various organisations.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. The question is simply one of funding. We need to identify where the where the funds for a 3-year programme would come from, and how that would build into the budget. That's one of the reasons why we're holding this meeting now, to enable the committee and the executive to make that consideration during the budget build. But yes, that's something we can certainly consider if the funding can be found.
I'm happy to table a line on this that committee is minded to suggest the council explores longer than 1-year funding. I'm happy to move that. Are people minded to be supportive of that, or would we like to just keep the status quo? Bob.
In general terms, I think there's probably something in between 1 year and 3 years fixed. In other words, I think from what I've heard, what they need is guidance on the biggish picture. So I wonder if there's something between offering sort of 3-year, long-term fixed grants, which might give us less ability to influence how that grant money is used over a 3-year period, if it's committed. But nevertheless gives them a little bit more stability in terms of what might be possible. That was just my thought.
Okay. Perhaps for now, I think our voices have been heard, and perhaps in the minutes with the feedback, we'd sort of note that the organisations were more accommodating towards a 3-year settlement. That probably keeps it as balanced. Yep. Okay. Members happy with that? Yep. Councillor Johnny Cope.
Sorry, can I just? Are you saying that we're going to look at exploring options? We're not saying that as a committee we're supporting a 3-year plan. I just want to be clear what we're agreeing to.
I think at the moment we're sticking with the recommendation, and we're highlighting in the minutes that a number of voluntary sector organisations would prefer 3-year rather than 1-year funding. I'm happy to move a stronger support to 3-year funding if committee is minded to support that, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. Councillor Rowlands.
Yeah, I mean, the last one to be pessimistic about this, but I think we're going to run slap up against the financial realities that if we start committing ourselves in a 3-month cycle, it seems to run smack up against any sort of budgetary policies that might be formulated by the council. I mean, I'm not a great supporter of that particular position, but the way that councils operate, I mean, we were talking about the fluctuation in the labour market in relation to the Job Club, for instance. Well, we could be in a situation where, to some extent, unemployment is not a crucial area in this borough, for instance, in 2.5 years' time. So that's the problem. In general, I think it's a good idea.
The question's been answered. So you may need to turn your mic off, Murray. If we move on to the next agenda item, which is the committee's work programme.
I'll just say 1 or 2 words on this. Thanks, committee. Literally, you'll see a work programme which was agreed at the last meeting of the committee, detailing the committee's planned agenda items for November and February. Basically happy to take any comments or amendments to the work programme.
Cool. Any amendments to the work programme or suggestions from committee?
Thank you, Chair. My question is this work programme reviewed at each meeting, or is now the only opportunity to add, amend, suggest changes?
I would imagine within reason it's happy to be amended as things progress. That would be logical to keep it live rather than cast it in stone as things change. A couple of items that I'd like to consider inserting in. My understanding is that Thames Water would be looking to attend one of these committee meetings. So I'd like to pencil that in for our spring meeting. I know that potholes and the challenges from last year have been a huge challenge for residents across our borough. And I'd like to take the opportunity to invite Surrey County Council to the November meeting to talk through with us what their plans are through the winter, giving them opportunity before we break into the winter to tell us what's likely to be happening and what their plans are there, because obviously they're an external partner that many millions are spent on. And I'd like to take the opportunity to invite the Minister for Levelling Up to come along to the November meeting to talk to us about funding, which I think is pretty critical to a local authority when we've heard the challenges around money. So those are the three things that I'd like to consider putting on there. Are committee comments on that?
Thank you, Chair. In respect to Surrey County Council, are they bound by any legislation to attend our meetings? Is there any requirement for them to do so?
I think that's an excellent question. They are obviously a provider of services to residents in the borough. So I hope if we were to invite them to come along, they would be minded to. My understanding is that they would be accommodating towards coming along. Are we happy with those suggestions of additions to the work programme? Do members have any others they'd like to add? Nope. Okay. In which case, I think that concludes the business of the committee for this evening. Thank you very much.